Hello, friends, and welcome to the Mythological Africans podcast, where we read and talk about stories from African mythology and folklore. I am your host, Helen Nde. If you are a writer or spend time among writers, the adage to write what you know is something you will eventually hear. There are, of course, merits and demerits to the advice, but one cannot deny the fact that in the hands of a skilled wordsmith, intimate knowledge of a subject, be it a person or a place or a people or a time or an idea, results in prose and poetry which evolves sentences, paragraphs, and stanzas from lines and blocks of words to vessels of wonder, stimulating, delighting, and even awing in the way that certain paintings, photographs, sculptures, or musical compositions do. This is the sense you get from reading Ibrahim al-Koni's Al-Majus or The Animist. It is a massive book, over 500 pages broken down into two volumes and four parts. But only a book of this size could possibly contain everything al-Koni puts into it the way he does. I've spoken about this before. Reading Al-Majus feels like having a long conversation with the Sahara Desert, and not just any conversation, one of those wide ranging, depth scoring conversations at the end of which you see the person you are talking with and yourself with eyes refreshed by the sheer complexity and beauty of what you've experienced. Egyptian writer and culture critic Ismail Fayed summarizes it beautifully when he says, one reads Alconi's text as if one is seeing the Sahara unfold before his mind's eye with its harshness and strangeness, but also ineffable beauty. And this comes from his intimate knowledge of the topography, the climate, the flora, and the fauna of the Sahara Desert. But one also cannot talk about the Sahara Desert without talking about the sun under whose unrelenting, and what might even say, obsessive glare that landscape wreathes and waxes into and out of being. And in Almajas, the sun and the desert are locked in a relationship that reads like one of those grand enmities of fact and fiction, but which eventually reveal themselves to be grand amours, grand love affairs, right? Each party aware of and perhaps a bit resentful of the other's ability to drill to the core and extract the essence of the other. And in this relationship, the wind, the mercurial rains, the plants and animals, and the humans are their children and other members of the household whose moods and movements depend on and whose loyalties are divided between these two vastnesses. Ibrahim al-Koni is possibly the world's best known Libyan writer. He is of the Tuareg people born in the Fezzan region of southwestern Libya, and he spent his formative years in the desert, first learning the language and ways of the Tuareg before eventually learning Arabic and then traveling to Russia to study literature and journalism. He has maintained a strong attachment to his Tuareg roots, however, and states in an essay that it was after a return to his homeland and a period of communion with the desert that this book, which is often hailed as the Tuareg epic, emerged. In Almajus, the sun is a bit of a tyrant. It rises every morning to ascend to its eternal throne in the zenith of the sky, which Al-Koni lyrically describes as the heart of space. And from there lashes the desert and its denizens with fiery weeps, drying out the air and ultimately unleashing the wind, known as the Qibli, which continues the work of provoking the desert by stirring up massive clouds of reddish dust which suffocate the landscape and eventually crosses the Mediterranean to fall as crimson rain in the southern part of Europe. The desert, on its part, resists the sun's tyranny in the way that creatures who know what it means to bear life do. It crafts features and gives its creatures with the ability to evolve better and better ways to adapt to their reality. There are the written flowers which know how to bid their time, shoring up resources to eventually bloom fragrantly and flagrantly, riotous in their determination to retain their claim on the land. There are underground reservoirs of water which spirit away enough rainfall to sustain the creatures that know just how to read the clues left by the desert, or when and where least expected bubble to the surface. There's Barbary sheep who can metabolize water from the scraps of vegetation which stubbornly spring from and cling to the craggy terrain of their habitat. And there are humans who, like all children born to parents with a contentious relationship, know how to survive by carefully reading the environment and adapting as needed. In Al-Majus, the desert has another peculiar gift, and one which it gives specifically to her human children, and that is the gift of wisdom, discerned from the silence and stillness of her voluminous folds. But the desert is a symbol of even more to Ibrahim al-Koni. It is a symbol of the soul, he says in an interview. The desert is a companion of freedom. The desert is a companion of the noblest thing in human existence. So we must glorify the desert, kneel to the desert, pray to the desert, because every sign in the desert, it is a prayer for eternity. The desert, he says, is not only a symbol of human existence, but it is a symbol of the eternal in its noblest sense. It is not in vain that all great ideas come from the desert. It is cruel, of course, because freedom is cruel. It is non existence, of course, because death is non existence. But in some reality, behind death, if we believe that there is a truth behind death, if we believe in the immortality of the soul, then the desert is the only evidence in this world that can prove it. I can't say enough about how happy I am to have discovered Ibrahim al-Koni. He is prolific and well respected, and an author whose work has been translated into all living languages. But most importantly, his work preserves the history and culture of one of the continent and the world's most visible and yet disenfranchised people, the Tuareg. And in addition, he is a brilliant writer who is truly astounding in his ability to send his words flowing from the pages to your mind, to flood your senses with the sights and smells and sounds and tastes and temperatures and textures of his people and their ways. This is definitely one African author whose work, I believe, deserves to be made into films. Hopefully, with a cinematographer who will appreciate the quality of the material that has been provided. So, have you read Almajil's or any of Ibrahim Al-Koni's other works? What did you think? Come tell us about it if you have. And when we come back next week, we will have more excursions into folkloric places in African literature. Thank you for listening.